I want to welcome anybody that's new or relatively new to Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't looking for a new way of life. I got here through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings with the Communist Police Department in the state of New Jersey, and I was really sure that these people were just out to get us. I was taught to drink. My mother and father were both drinkers. The whole family was drinkers. And there was a lot of confusion growing up as a young child. I don't know this as a young child. I learned most of what I know after I got sober and decided to give these 12 steps a try because I was out of answers. And I was standing on the lawn, about 18 months sober, getting ready to have a fist fight with my father. And if we do that, then we're going to have to go down to the bar and have a drink afterwards. So I didn't want to do that. And I was walking around Alcoholics Anonymous parroting what I would hear at one meeting, and I would bring it to another. And they would, some poor guy would think that I sounded really spiritual, and he asked me to sponsor him. And so I said, sure, because you never say no to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I offered to sponsor him, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I wanted a quick study. I went over to the big men's meeting that they had on Thursday nights at the Gorilla meeting, they called it, in San Jose, and I got a guy named John Reed. John Reed stood about 6'5", 6'6", and I said, John, what do we do? I got a guy who wants to go through these steps. What do we do? Step one, okay? Tell me about the pros and careers of your drinking. Okay, and what else? And then get back to me after you read that. Okay, I called him, I tell him, tell me about the pros and cons of your drinking. Get back to me after you get that. And this guy's more thirsty than I am, so he did it in a week, and he called me. So I said, well, I better do my homework. And I called John, and I went back to John, and we got to step two. That's at 18 months sober after I moved across the country, 6 months sober, with a girl that I owed $600 to because she had bailed me out on the previous charge 2 weeks earlier, and I was back in jail again within 2 weeks. And I was one of those guys that used to have a regular jail. I didn't probably as a kid aspire to be a prisoner or have a favorite jail, but I did have a favorite one. If I was going to have to go to jail, this one was pretty, I knew the place. I knew how it worked, and it was comfortable. And while I was in that jail, H&I, Hospitals and Institutions of Alcoholics Anonymous, brings jails into correctional facilities, so anybody who's involved with that, thank you. A guy named Bob Monahan from Brooklyn, New York came in, and he said, you just don't take the first drink no matter what. Your ass falls off, you put it in a wheelbarrow, you bring it to the meeting. That's it. And I said, Bob, you don't look like you've had fun in about 20 years. I have a lot of fun drinking, Bob. I'm afraid if I quit drinking, I'm going to be just like you. And I said, what do you do for fun, Bob? He said, well, I got a wife and a couple of kids at home. I'm a little older than you are, but I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife tonight. What are you going to do? That's not spiritual, Bob. I know people from AA. My mom and dad were both in AA, and I had people over the house, and they were a lot more nicer than you. And being the wise guy that I am, and the ego that I have, and the punk that I was, I said to him, well, how about if I get out of here, I go home and sleep with your wife? How you going to like me then, huh? And yeah. So I didn't know that God was working in my life. I didn't know that the Spirit was moving people and lining things up that come together later on in my story. But what happened that night really was God put two smart Alecs together because he knows his business. And Bob was just as much a smart Alec as I was. And so Bob did what every good H&I guy does. He writes his name in the book, call me if I can help, and he hands me the book and he leaves. And that was in the beginning of December. And then it was on Christmas Eve, 1988, when I raised my hand and claimed 90 days of sobriety at a meeting in the jail. And there was another group of guys that came in. And a guy had said something that didn't mean anything to me when he said it. What he said was, I didn't get in trouble every time I drank, but every time I got in trouble, I had been drinking. And that didn't really mean anything when he said it at the time. And the only question I had for these guys, it was Christmas Eve. I'm claiming 90 days of sobriety. Danny advises me that I was drinking last night. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, that stuff that you make in the kitchen, Bruno, that's alcohol. You were drinking. I said, oh, man. Well, that don't count. I'm in jail, right? Well, then sobriety don't count either, but you were drinking last night. And so I start thinking, and the wheels start turning, and I have what they call that moment of clarity. Man, I drink, and I don't even know I'm drinking. I'm standing here really thinking I got 90 days because I completed some rehab that they take you back and forth to by bus. And so I said, all right, I'll start over. Now, I didn't know that was going to be my last drink. I certainly would have had something better, but I had my last drink in jail on Christmas Eve. And I asked the guys that night, I said, so what's really going on here? You in some kind of trouble? You on probation? You owe the court some money or something? Why are you here on Christmas Eve? Because we want to give back what was so freely given to us. And you have no other obligation. No, not at all. We just want to give away what we have. And it put hope and faith back in humanity for me. I mean, really? I would never take time away from my family to come down here and be with a bunch of knuckleheads like me if I was, But I'm not in your position. I didn't know that I wasn't in their position because it hadn't happened yet. I haven't had a spiritual awakening. One of the things that the 12 steps says is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So if you've had one some other way, God bless you. But the book wasn't written when the whole thing really happened in that hospital room in 1934 with Bill Wilson. And he stands here, and there's a recording, and I can't find it anymore. I think they may have even taken it down off of YouTube, what he's about right before he died in 71, so it's about 1970, and he describes what happened in that room. Because they were telling him, you got to get on your knees. You got to give your life to Christ. And like he says in the big book, to Christ I certainly conceded, a great man, not too closely by those who followed him. Wasn't that nice? You're going to consider Christ a great man. No ego involved here, right? So what happens is the room lights up in the bright white light, and anybody that I have ever talked to who has experienced death or crossed over, and they all describe it the same way. There's a bright white light. There's an overwhelming sense of peace and understanding that I've never had before, and I'm perfectly okay in a world that I wasn't okay in 20 minutes ago. Now, I don't know about you, but that's what I was trying to explain to Bob, because that's exactly what happens to me when I have about 4 or 5 drinks, right? And so what happens is alcohol is spirits. In its original form, in the back in the 1700s, it was distilled and made for medical reasons. They were going to use it for treatment. And then we got a hold of it like we do everything else. And we found out that it did something for me that it doesn't do for normal people. And also what I didn't know is that when somebody else drinks it, the way that they process the sugar is different from the way that a real alcoholic's body processes. So we're not saying that term real alcoholic out of ego. We're saying it because if you don't know the difference and if you don't believe that you're a real alcoholic, you're probably not going to want to do the drastic and revolutionary proposals that Bill is talking about. But the moment I accepted them, the effect was electric, right? So after Ebby comes to see him, he doesn't tell you what happened in the next 2 days. Ebby comes to see him, and he's looking at his friend. I don't need to believe in miracles. I'm looking one directly across the kitchen table. There's something different. It's in his eyes. He's inwardly different. He's reorganized. His roots grasp new soil. He's not the same man. He's a different man. My gin will outlast his preaching, but he did know preaching. He came to share something with me, and he told me how 2 men had his commitment to the insane asylum suspended. And they were going to share with him a practical program of action if he would like to join them. And that's why he said it was drastic and revolutionary. And they wanted him to take an altar call and give his life to Christ. And my father and the temperance pledge and the scoffers on the be damned on the hill and the church and the Sunday morning preaching and my grandfather dying on his bed telling him the preacher's got no right to tell him how to live. And one of the biggest misunderstandings in Alcoholics Anonymous is Ebby didn't say choose whatever concept of God you want, Bill. He said choose your own conception of God, Bill. There is one who has all power. That one is God. And Bill knew, he said he'd not be bound by time or limitation. So there goes your doorknob theory, okay? There goes another human being, okay? Take that and throw it out the window because it doesn't work according to the writing. Now, what I understand is when he goes to the hospital, it's because after he went back 2 days after Ebby left his kitchen, he went and took the altar call at the Calvary Mission in New York City. And then he was so jittery and going through withdrawals from alcohol and withdrawals, they put him in the hospital again for the 4th time. The 3rd time is when he had the belladonna treatment. The 3rd time is, belladonna is a plant extract. A lot of it's familiar with acid, and I know you hear, Bill did LSD, and Bill got high on acid, and Bill was chasing skirts, and blah, blah, blah. No, the belladonna treatment, Jack Lambert was a guy that had to come over here and get a permit to do it because it was illegal in the United States. And when they talk about, when Carl Jung is talking to Roland Hazard about some of these methods that we have tried, they weren't legal in the United States. And they had to have all that done. His brother-in-law and his mother was a doctor. And they paid for all of this. Bill couldn't afford to be in that place. And so what happens is he goes back to the hospital and he's screaming from the depth of his being, if there is a God, show yourself. And that's when it happened for him. Now, when I understood that and I heard that, I went to God bless him, Kevin's no longer with us, and I don't know where that, somebody get excited, but Kevin Richardson was, he played his guitar on his first meeting, and he thought everybody would just love to hear him, and we did, it was good. And so, anyway, my life is not my own. My life was a gift from God. You already hit the lottery, okay? There was 1 million of you that came out of the chute. You got to be the one to be born, okay? Your life is a gift from God, and it's not for you to keep, it's for you to share with other people. And then for knuckleheads like me, I was given a second chance at a first-class life. And my idea of first class when I got here and my idea of first class today is 2 completely different things. I was doing, the ABCs they taught me on the alphabet soup on TV, and I was taught to chase money, property, prestige, sex, society, security, all of these things that never hold me down. All of them leave me wanting and unfulfilled. There's never enough of them. I have a spiritual malady. I'm suffering from a soul sickness. Satan is on me from the chute, okay? I go to the kindergarten at 5 years old, and my mother's dropping me off with these strangers and this 6-foot teacher, and I have no idea why she's leaving. Where are you going? My first abandonment issue. I don't know it's an abandonment issue at 5. I'm experiencing something, though. Something else is going on here. I'm only going to be able to do what I am. Now, everybody knows my body needs rest. I got to go to work for 40 hours, and I got to go to bed every night and get some rest. Otherwise, I wouldn't make the whole 40 hours of work, right? But do I give my mind rest? Do I give my mind something positive to go by? And what am I feeding it? What am I listening to? What am I becoming a part of? One of the best experiences I had was when I seen it written on a wall. Somebody had quoted it at a meeting one time, and I walked in, and it was written on the back of this meeting hall, and it said, I am not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And then I read in the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox because I didn't understand the Sermon on the Mount in the Bible. I didn't understand the begats and the beatitudes. It was very confusing, but as they explained it to me, God is neither man nor woman. God is neither Jew nor Greek nor Muslim. God is love. And then they said, why don't you come up with the best definition of love that you could come up with and be that and see what comes into your life? Well, what does that look like? They all said it. The book, the Mormon, the book of Quran, the Torah, the Bible, all talk about the God of Moses. They're all talking about there is one who has all power. How do I get to him? And the Old Testament and the New Testament and all the arguments about, well, who gets to change the rules and who gets to, and I go in and I hear the hypocrisy. Well, this year we're accepting Nob Hill gift cards. You think a homeless guy cares whether it's Nob Hill or Lucky's? What does the matter with you people? I got a thirst for this experience. I want to experience what Bill experienced. And I'm in the prayer with Kevin and we're holding and they're dropping. And I dropped. And then I went back to Kevin and I said, I didn't really experience anything. I just didn't want to blow your cover in here, And he laughed like that. And he goes, in the ABCs, God could and would if he were sought. okay? And on page 57 in my big book, when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. Now, my sponsor said, you know, the problem with a guy like you, Keith, is God will show up tonight, light up the room, Jesus will be here, I am, and you will be laying here tomorrow night going, no, do it again. Doubting Thomas, right? Let's talk about the metaphors. Let's talk about the Father and the Son, as opposed to a spirit of love that has no boundaries, okay? A spirit of love that has no limit. I'm human, I'm finite, I'm limited. God is unlimited. That's why I need his strength, not mine, see? I got to be able to be in situations and be an example of him when the situations, the easy ones are easy. Nobody has a problem with those, but that's not true. In my history and in my inventory through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not even honest or daring when I was kind and gracious. I was kind and gracious because I was trying to change what I think you thought about me, which is still serving me. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate seemingly without provocation. I didn't even do anything. You know, what is your motive behind what you're doing? If it ends up serving you, it's not serving God. You're doing one or the other today. Are you serving you or are you serving God? July 4th, weekend. It's the 3rd. I'm off. I got this thing called PTO. What is that? Nice. I'll take it. And I'm going to go up, and I got 1,200 miles of waterway. When I came, I was telling Emma, I said, is this formal down here? Because I know some people are really strong about those suit and ties. And I said, you have to understand, my mother and father were the best looking couple in America as far as I was concerned. And they can jitterbug and cha-cha like nobody's business. I mean, they were just the best. And you talk about contradiction. How could two people do that, experience that together, love each other that way, and then fight like they did? It just, as a kid, it makes no sense. Men are not afraid. Men don't cry. I'm doing both. Something's wrong with me. I'm a kid. I'm experiencing Satan working, trying to break us down, trying to kill the joy in the perfect garden that was left here for us. And there's enough here for all of us. And yet the whole world, not just in Alcoholics Anonymous, is out ready to blow the whole thing up. Selfishness, self-centeredness, greed. When I did a 6-step inventory about the 7 deadly sins, envy, greed, gluttony, sloth, lust, anger, and pride played a part in every decision I would make because I thought I was supposed to go out and get and take what I had coming and maybe some of yours, and then I could place myself a platitude above you or a platitude below you. That was the problem as an alcoholic. I used the example of a pendulum on a piano, and it swings like this. And you throw in an alcoholic and what's going on in between his ears and what he's thinking, and it's doing this on both sides, just tacking on both sides of the fence. And if you stay here and you do the work that's necessary and you're fortunate enough, it slows down from from instead of, side to side, it's just a little more mellow. And how do I do that? How do I do that? I have to be a maximum service to other people. See, when I want to know what's going on with you, when I want to know how I can help you, my brain finally gets the rest that it needs from all the squirrel cage that's going on up there. So if I get out of myself and I get into what I can do for you, my stuff almost seemingly takes care of itself. And then God said, if we do the work well, he'll take care of our needs, not my wants. I had to learn to separate my wants and my needs. That good-looking, handsome couple, my parents, my dad wore a suit. And he was a damn good-looking man in a suit. And I followed my father. He was an executive, and he told me, I'm not going out and digging in the dirt and banging hammers when I can make 3 times as much money wearing a suit, driving around in an air-conditioned car. And he had the company credit card, and he had the company car new every 3 years, and that's what I want to be. When Bill talks about the maelstrom of Wall Street, it had me in its grips. I want to be an executive. I got the job at the Madison Avenue Advertising Agency. I was doing leads for my father on the phone, but I'm calling at 19 years old as a consultant. So I don't say I'm me, I say I'm my father because I sound like him on the phone. And then he goes and runs the appointment and I get paid a commission. And we made some money. We made some really big money. So at 6 months sober, that young girl that I owed that money to decided to move to California. And she said, you want to do a different life, come on, you're doing good. You're not drinking, you're sober. Where are we going? I got a job in Foster City. I said, well, where are we going to live? She goes, well, we could live there, but that's really expensive, but we could, San Francisco? No, I don't want to go there. I heard about those guys. And I said, a little homophobia in there. That's, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I said, where's the beach? Where's the boardwalk? And she said, well, the closest thing they have is down here in Santa Cruz to what you have here in New Jersey. And I said, well, she said, but that's too far. I can't make work from there. And when she did that, she ran her finger right through San Jose. And I said, what about San Jose? Can you work from there? And she goes, yeah, why do you want to go to San Jose? I said, you know that song, right? Oh, whoa, 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 do you know? Well, my dad sold Dionne Warwick a Singer sewing machine. He was a Singer sewing machine salesman for a while there, right? And so I said, let's go to San Jose. I want to take you back to Bob Monahan in that jail. I got cut loose early. It was March 1st, my birthday. And Danny, my cohort in jail, says, I saw the list. They're cutting people loose. Your name's on it, man. You're going to get a birthday gift tonight. And they called out 10 names that night, and I wasn't one of them. Now I want to choke Danny. And I said, Danny, what are you doing? Why you tell me that stuff? They already told me I was leaving in February, and then told me I can't. I got to stay to the end of April. That girl's moving. I'm on. This is bad. God, what do you want from me? And you weren't really supposed to get out. It's your third DUI, not your first. And, you were hoping on a mistake of somebody else that would have had to pay the price, right? Once again, it's okay if it's at somebody else's expense. Nothing selfish here, Ma. Anyway, so March 2nd, they called 10 more names, and I was on that list. And the thought came out, it's in my own voice, and it says, well, you don't need to drink anymore, your birthday's over. So now I'm 90 days sober, coming up on 90 days sober, and I could leave the jail. So I'm making a phone call. Dad, and I know he's got a 12-ounce glass of scotch. Now, the bad thing is they cut you loose at 12 o'clock at night, at 12:30 in the morning, and people aren't happy about it.
You got an inmate calling from the county jail.
I know, you ain't got to tell them 6 times. Anyway, all right, so what? Dad, I'm getting out, come down and get me. Tell me one time you got in trouble sober, a-hole. And he hung up the phone. I said, doesn't sound like he's coming. But when he said that, what that guy had said in the meeting on Christmas Eve, I didn't get in trouble every time I had been drinking, but every time I got in trouble, I had been drinking. Those two came together for a moment of clarity. And my birthday's over. I don't need a drink. So who else am I going to call? That girl, I owe her $600. She wants to protect her investment. Hey, baby.
Inmate from the county jail, call and collect again.
Shut up. How you doing, honey? Mrs. Schwab. Ladies, if you got somebody call and collect from the county jail, you could probably do better. I'm not judging. I'm just reporting the fact. But anyway, series of bad breaks and misunderstandings. I understand. I empathize and sympathize. But so she says, no, I'm going to Atlantic City, 4:30. I'm not getting up and coming down there. And if you're going to drink, we can't do this. You're crazy. I love you to death, but you're crazy. I swear I'm never drinking again. And as I say that, I know I'm lying. And so what happens is I go back to my jail cell, I get on my knees, and I say, God, Jesus, whoever you are, if I'm not supposed to drink, you're going to need to take away the desire. That meeting said you have to have a desire to stop drinking. I got no desire to stop drinking. I like it. I like the effect produced by alcohol, like the doctor's opinion says. Now, a lot of people don't know, or you may know, Dr. Silkworth, who wrote the formula about the allergy and the obsession, is a neurophysicist from Princeton University who took a job working at the Schlepp House with drunks and alcoholics because there was no work at that time. He was way overqualified for the position that he had. He's a brain doctor. He probably knows a little bit more than you. But he didn't know about the spiritual malady. And when something happened to him and Bill called him to the room, he said, I don't know what it is. But Carl Jung explained it explicitly to Roland Hazard, and he says it's phenomena. I'm not going to call it a miracle because I'm a man of science and they already think I'm crazy being a psychiatrist in the 1930s. So what I want to share with you is I've never seen a single case like yours recover. Are there no exceptions? Here or there, once in a while, people have what we call vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. What's that? Something's happened, we can't explain it. Men of science have a hard time with stuff they can't explain. They can't explain it. They don't understand it because that's the delusion of control, trying to run your life again. So am I going to surrender and abandon myself? How are you making out? You chase money, property, prestige. I had my brother here tonight, my brother Darren, thank you for coming down. He was 1992 after his tour in Iraq. He came out of the Army. He came out here. My mother and father were here. My older brother, John Wayne, was here. They were in Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother and father were secretary in the meeting, right? My brother, John Wayne, I want to say, 6 months of sobriety, decided to start drinking again. I was having a wedding reception party at a friend's house, and he hit this thing and hit the button. It was a trash compactor, and you heard bang, glass shattered all over the place. As a real alcoholic, he downed a pint of vodka at a sponsor's house and disposed of it in the trash disposal. John Wayne, actual name, John Wayne O'Conowitz, drank himself to death. Literally. He was in a coma for about 3 weeks, and my dad said that he got on his knees the night before, and he said, God, please, I've been a horrible teacher. I've been a horrible example, and I taught him how to drink, and I taught him, to do those things. Don't take my son. And we went to the hospital the next day, and there he was awake. Now, that's the problem, my dad, and the problem that I have. As soon as God answers my prayers, I don't need him anymore, right? So I love that song, who am I to expect a Savior when I only call on God when I need a favor, right? So be about my business, be about the life that I have planned for you, and you will come to know a new freedom and a new happiness, not one that you've experienced before. The new freedom and the new happiness that I've experienced in the result of Alcoholics Anonymous and practicing this thing and abandoning myself and trying to serve my needs, I had the suits, I had the bling, I had pinky rings, gold bracelets on each. I had a Mr. T starter kit, El Dorado. I had the dune buggy in the garage, the KZ 650 in the garage, the hot tub double lounger 10 by 10, all that stuff that's supposed to make you happy and successful, and it leaves you unfulfilled. It leaves you wanting more and more. I worship idols. I worship everything. But when I ask you to worship God, you go, oh, that's a little drastic. That sounds really, really boring. You sound like Bob again, Mr. Boredom. But when the Spirit moves, and when the darkness gets removed, and the light comes out and shines, God's light shines from your heart. That's what he saw in Ebby. That's what he saw in his friend. That's what you see when you go to these churches and this music's playing and you can feel the Spirit and you can feel it moving you and your hair stands up in your arms. The Holy Spirit's touching you down the back of your neck. What is love? I didn't know. I picked it up at a garage sale. It was hanging on the wall in my house. Corinthians. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is never rude, never selfish, never irritated. Try that for an afternoon and see how you make out. It's not easy to do, but try it and practice these principles in all your affairs. Especially when I have 5 drinks and I'm the guy on the highway. Yeah, go ahead, man, no problem. I think I'm a better driver when I drink. The county and the state don't think so, but I did. I'm more polite after I have 4 or 5 drinks. Now, when you come here and you have a tragic, tragic story like mine and like a lot of yours, Bob, I called him that morning and he came and picked me up at that jail. Well, I called him at midnight and he said, hey, remember that gorgeous wife I told you I had? He said, yeah, I'm laying right next to her. He said, you ain't got no life worthwhile anyway. Call me tomorrow morning. If you're still there, I'll come and get your dumb ass. Bob, you ain't spiritual at all. You need help. So we hang up. And I wait. And I got to ask the ID officer at the jail, don't give up my spot. Bob's coming at 7:30. I can't. I'm back on at 3 tomorrow. If you're still here, somebody else is going home. You're still, what do you think this is, a hotel? What am I going to do? You can't come. So I stay there. Bob come and got me the next morning. I've been released from that same jail 5 more times at least. I walked out the door. And I went down the county highway, about 6 miles down on the right-hand side of the Gentleman's Club. I don't know about you, but after I spent 6 months in jail, I need a drink, and I need to see a woman. That's my priorities when I get out of jail. I didn't do that. I didn't know God was working in my life. I didn't know he was answering that prayer on my knees in that jail cell. I didn't know the desire to drink had been removed before I ever took a step. God takes away the obsession to drink. The steps take me to a new way of living. Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, self-examination. I used to walk into a room like this and I do all your examination. Loser, lop. What's with the cowboy hat, dude? Jesus, you know. This is the how and the why of it. Quit playing God. It doesn't work. Hereafter in this drama of life, he is the principal. We are his agents. I was an insurance agent. I know what that is. There's a certain set of guidelines and rules I got to follow. If I don't follow them, you're fired. Okay, I go with that. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are the children. Like most ideas, this is simple. It is the keystone. The first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are the stones that you're cementing in place for your foundation that will build you a foundation that will not shake regardless of the things that life throws at you. I had more trouble after I got sober. I saw her in AA. There she was. She was with him. Was that covet thy neighbor's things or what? Yeah, it must be. I couldn't understand it, but it doesn't matter at this point because, man, does she look good. And I manufactured it all the way, and I got exactly what I asked for, that girl. And then she came with 2 boys, and she had a previous marriage, and now we call her like Mark Lundholm. I referred to the ex-wife as the plaintiff. And I never experienced more hatred, more anger, and more wanting to have revenge, but not having an avenue because we had this little boy together. And I had already been locked up for 5 days. And I knew I let that kid down already. If he needed me right now, I can't get to him. I failed already as a father. And with all the anger and all the things that I didn't like about my dad, I became just like him. I had his good qualities too, though, as well as I'm not looking at it as the child anymore. I'm looking at it as the adult, as an all-loving child of God, as we are all children of God. That includes your parents. Lose your earthly titles, lose your earthly names, mother, father, brother, sister, and start thinking of them as your brother, and how can you possibly understand where they're at? I didn't do that. I used to come into the world and I wanted you to all understand where I'm at. And when I ran that 7 deadly sins against my personal inventory instead of your personal inventory, I found out that I lived in a world trying to satisfy my basic instincts at your expense. Nothing selfish and self-centered here, Ma. And when I could change my focus, and I have to do this on a daily reprieve, I don't get to have it from last week. I don't get to have it from 33 years ago. I got to do it on a daily basis, otherwise Satan creeps back into my thinking. The stinking thinking becomes the drinking thinking, becomes the drink. I've seen many men who are far more spiritual than me, far smarter than I am, try to not do this and fail. There's the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The recovery, the service, and the unity. If I stay in unity with my home group through service, I build a foundation of recovery that's unshakable. Can it be that simple? What did you do for somebody else today? What are you going to do for somebody else today? I had no idea that by serving you, I was serving myself. The simple religious idea that AA borrowed, whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. It's the truth. God is the truth and the light. And you've been living in the darkness and the lie. Okay? The simple idea is love the Lord thy God as you love thy neighbor as thyself. Most people don't even know their neighbor's names anymore. See what you can do to be a maximum service to somebody else, and watch how the spirit in you changes and the light shines through you and they want what you have. You will be worthy to be called the salt of the earth. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Okay, Recovery Church, at this time, this is what we do here. We give out surrender crosses. Thank you again for such